Gonna have to send Poliwrath out into Shadow Grumble Charm, tearing us apart. However, Poliwrath pretty tick. We make the Scald. Scald will be secure in the knockout. Jellicent is still alive. It's going to be counter versus Hex. Who will win? Well, you're going to have to watch the video to find out. Welcome back to the home of Shadow Pokemon. Last Saturday we had Poliwag Community Day, and that gave us access to counter Poliwrath. The team on the left, Poliwrath, Double Dark Poison, a team I've been using way back since Season 9. It was pretty good when we only had Mudshot. However, now Poliwrath has access to counter it better than ever. I did intend to run this team and showcase it for you all. However, I've had multiple people message me saying they are absolutely killing it in the Open Ultra League with my team, and one of them players is Ricflairbest. Huge shout out to Ricflair, who sent us 4 sets of battles for us to enjoy. So without any further ado, let's jump into the commentary. And in game 1, we lead Poliwrath into the Kentucky Fried Chicken Bird of Death, a pretty neutral matchup. The opponent safe switches into Miltank, a really cool XL flex. However, this cow about to get eaten alive. We threw the pup, committed to the full counter farm down. The opponent has Clefable in the back. We see the instant pivot into Drapion. This game already looks over. The opponent fires off the Meteor Mash. Drapion slugs it off and going to return fire with the Sludge Bomb. The opponent commits a shield. They see we're running Sludge Bomb, and the opponent says, fuck that, and concede the match. Moving on to the next one. We see a great lead, Poliwrath into Steelix. Steelix does have access to Psychic Fangs. However, Poliwrath pretty thick, and Steelix has pretty much no attack stat. We tank that on the chin. Ricflair then returns fire with the Scald. Scald draws a Protect Shield, and we see the pivot into Drapion once again. The opponent doesn't even build up anywhere near an Earthquake, an easy tank. Psychic Fang is single resisted by a Dark Poison type in Ricflair, then returns fire with the Crunch. Crunch gets the defense drop. Ricflair outpaces to the next Crunch, and Crunch will be secure in the knockout. The opponent now sends out Ampharos. Ampharos might look for the full Volt Switch farm down, but Drapion so spammy. The first Crunch draws a Protect Shield. Again, we see the defense drop. This now forces the opponent to dump energy. Thunder Punch secures the knockout. We now send out Alolan Muk. These poison jabs going to tear through Ampharos. Ricflair, the 2-0 shield advantage, chooses to shield up the Thunder Punch. The opponent pivots out into Cresselia, looking to reset their defense debuff, but my god, Alolan Muk now primed to sweep Dark Pulse lands for huge super effective damage. Ricflair invests his final Protect Shield on the Moonblast. Rick can now overfarm massively. This Dark Pulse will be getting rid of the super bulky, super annoying Cresselia, get absolutely wrecked. Back out comes Ampharos, and because we beautifully overfarmed, we're 1 poison jab away from the next Dark Pulse, and that is going to be all she wrote. GG's, and thanks for playing. Rough leads. We see the instant pivot into Drapion. Poliwrath might not fancy the work of this pesky spider. However, Drapion certainly does. We outpace to the Crunch. We get ourselves early shield advantage. Ricflair gonna match shields. Drapion will be able to outpace the opponent, sends out the Walrus. Drapion farms up, attempts to CMP tie to the Icicle Sphere. The opponent takes the extra. We fire off 1 more Crunch, getting the debuff. This time the opponent does play to the CMP. Drapion fires off Crunch number 2. The opponent needs to throw an Earthquake to secure the knockout. Icicle Sphere won't get the job done. Switch timer pops up. We snipe with Poliwrath. Back out comes that pesky spider. You will notice Ricflair is farming up, looking to bait an Ice Punch. We don't have it, but as always, fake it till you make it. We shield up a Cross Poison. Holy smokes, a spicy moveset from the opponent, and the bait works. The opponent shielded up a Power Up Punch. The opponent then pivots out into Giratina. Poliwrath on this moveset going to be getting absolutely walled. However, Scald does have a chance of lowering the opponent's attack. We fire off the Scald and get the attack drop. We're looking to save Poliwrath. Pivot out into Alolan Muk. It's now all shields down. Muk now looking primed to sweep. With the lowered attack, we can tank these Dragon Claws for days. The opponent fires off Dragon Claw number 2, and Muk still in the green. Giratina fires off Dragon Claw number 3. Muk is resisting the Shadow Claws. Rick's just got overfarm enough. 1 Dark Pulse will be taking care of Giratina, and the overfarm will mean we're going to outpace Galvantula to the charge move. Galvantula pretty classy, and Dark Pulse is going to seal the deal. GG's. A very dominating win despite a rough lead. Speaking of rough leads, Deoxys is definitely not what Poliwrath's looking for. We see the pivot into Drapion, and the opponent answers with Alolan Sandslash. Due to them being on Legacy Shadow Claw, this matchup isn't actually as bad as you'd expect. The opponent actually baits us with an Ice Punch on Rick's huge Gahonas. Called the bait, we now return fire with Crunch. Number 2 and Sandslash is now forced to shield first. Rick looking to make a play. At switch or forcing both shields, we commit a shield outpace to the next Crunch. Crunch will be knocking out or forcing the final shield. The opponent puts up that shield. We switch out into Poliwrath, catching the move and sneaking a counter. Poliwrath fires off the Ice Punch back out. Comes Defense Deoxys. They are going to outpace us to a potential Thunderbolt. Ricflair not interested in shielding Poliwrath. Poliwrath survives on minimal HP, makes the Scald, and Scald lands for decent neutral damage. Once again, Ricflair's got himself shield advantage Alolan Muk in the endgame. Ricflair thinking about shielding the Thunderbolt. We do commit a shield. Can we now jab down before the next one? It's going to be tight. Alolan Muk does make it, and we're at almost 100 energy. Sandslash is energy dry, but we're almost capped, so Ricflair is going to fire off the Dark Pulse immediately. Dark Pulse secures the knockout. The opponent's final Pokemon is Shadow Snorlax. We're going for the Sludge Wave. I think the win con is possibly to throw 2 Dark Pulses. Look to catch the move on Drapion, however, Ricflair did throw the Hail Mary. The opponent has over farms. Can Drapion outpace to the charge move? No, the opponent gets there one turn before. Very, very nice endgame from the opponent. GG's to them. In the next battle, we see Poliwrath into Alolan Ninetales. This matchup is a lot better due to us having access to counter, and holy smokes, they're on Powder Snow as well. Ricflair fires off the Scald. We nearly one-shot the Alolan Ninetales. We then see the pivot into Drapion, and the opponent answers with their own Drapion, so evidently they haven't got a great response for a Dark Poison. Rick has the energy lead here, so we should be able to maintain alignment. However, I suppose it doesn't really matter as the opponent's Ninetales is on minimal HP. We're going to return fire with our own Crunch. It's just a matchup with 2 super spammy Scorpions firing off resisted charge moves. The opponent fires off one final Crunch. Rick over farms, fires off the next Crunch. Crunch will be lethal or force a shield. The opponent looking to 2 shield. The Flying Toilet in the back, they come in, get the wing attack farm down. Alolan Muk should be able to poison jab its way through the remainder of the team. We actually choose to send out Poliwrath, looking to force the energy off the opponent. Ricflair actually correctly shields up a Hurricane. The opponent then goes for the Wham Bam combo play, sending out Alolan Ninetales. However, they go for a Weather Ball bait. Rick then secures the knockout with the Scald. We then see the pivot into Muk, and Muk just going to be far too oppressive for this Flying Toilet. Ricflair with still 1 Protect Shield, 2 hide behind. We shield up the Weather Ball. We are going to return fire with a Dark Pulse. However, the opponent has 2 Protect Shields, so I think I'd just go for a fast move beatdown if I was playing. The opponent does reach the Hurricane, which will be knocking out Muk. However, Poliwrath going to be able to get the resisted counter farm down and take that game. In the next battle, we see Poliwrath into that Bear Trap. The opponent safe switches into Jellicent. Arguably the best safe switch in the Ultra League. That's why I love Drapion, as even though they've got access to Surf now, this is a pretty dominant matchup for our Scorpion. Ricflair fires off 1 Poison Sting and the Crunch. The opponent going to reach 1 more Surf, however, not going to be lethal. They're going to have a difficult time of trying to hex us down. Ricflair over farms nicely, fires off 4 Poison Stings and the Crunch for optimal fast move timing. Again, Ricflair's fast move timing been on point. Back out comes the Bear Trap, but Drapion's still not done. If the opponent goes for the full Mud Shot farm down, Drapion will make 1 final Crunch. Holy smokes, Drapion, you fucking monster. Poliwrath now comes back in. The opponent easily enough for an Earthquake. We see Rick invest the shield. Good shield as the opponent did full send. They've got Virizion in the back, and it's going to be RPS for the win. GG's. In the next battle, we see Poliwrath into Alolan Muk. Evidently another Man of Culture. The opponent needs to farm up to 10 to bait any sort of move that is going to hurt us. The opponent throws on 8. This can only be an Acid Spray or Dark Pulse, an easy tank. We return fire with the Scald. Scald goes unshielded. The opponent then pivot out into Giratina, and here comes Drapion. Drapion again finding itself in a really favourable matchup. Crunch lands for heavy super effective damage. The Shadow Claw variant of Giratina does actually outpace Drapion, as it only takes them 5, then 4 Shadow Claws for each Dragon Claw, whereas Drapion takes 5 Poison Stings every time for the Crunch. If the opponent was running Dragon Breath, it would take the equivalent of 6 Poison Stings. It takes them 12 for each of them Dragon Claws. Rick now over farms, fires off the Crunch on the CMP tile. The opponent shields. Rick matches shields, then returns fire with another Crunch. The opponent likely to let this go, which they do. Then send out Sylveon for the full Charm Down, Farm Down. Let's count how long it's going to take the opponent to top left. The opponent lasts all of about 4 poison jabs and concede the match. Moving on to the next one. Poliwrath into Trevenant, dreadful. We safe switch into Alolan Muk and the opponent answers with Swampert. Things might look dreadful, but when you're on an ABB team, you look to bait out the hardest counter for your Dark Poison and hope your second one can sweep. Holy crap, the opponent didn't shield the Dark Pulse. We actually get a simul KO. Wow, Muk absolutely putting in work. It's now the guessing game. Do we guess right? No, Drapion is aligned with Ampharos. Poliwrath with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. We fire off the crunch. The opponent lets it go. Rick, still with 2 Protect Shields, 2 high beyond, going to be shielding up absolutely everything. We shield up the first Thunder Punch. Return fire with another crunch. Drapion needs to hard carry the team. The opponent already at the next Thunder Punch. Rick now invests his final Protect Shield. Ricflair going to need to pull off some kind of wizardry to win this game. I would have liked to see him try and bank this move and make a catch. The opponent shields up the crunch. We don't catch. Thunder Punch will be securing the knockout, and Poliwrath into Trevenant. Never good even on Ice Punch, but as we're running Scald, this will hit for reasonable resisted damage. However, Trevenant just going to be far too spammy for us. We'll actually survive 1 Seed Bomb. However, the opponent is going to outpace to the next one, and we're unfortunately going to take a loss. GG's to that opponent. Poliwrath getting hard countered. It now makes sense why the opponent completely sacked their Swampert, as they had 2 great answers for Poliwrath. In the next battle, we see Poliwrath into Galarian Wheezing. Again, not a fantastic matchup. The opponent at a potential Play Rough. Rick shields, and my god, was it a good shield. The opponent did have Play Rough. We return fire with the Scald again, getting the attack drop. Rick then looks to make a catch. We see the simul swap of Drapion into Jellicent. This Jellicent is on bubble. However, Drapion's still going to be in a pretty good spot here. We tank the Surf, return fire with the Crunch, and Crunch lands for heavy super effective damage. Again, Rick farms up throws at great timing. This is why he's repping that legend stance, because his fast move timing has been on point. The opponent chooses the shield. Rick not willing to shield up the Surf. Drapion makes another Crunch. Holy smokes, Rick trusting in his IVs, and Drapion does not let him down. Rick is now going to be able to realign, and Alolan Muk can have a little tasty snack in the form of Wheezing. The opponent's final Pokemon is Toxicroak. This usually isn't a great spot to be in our Poliwrath. With a huge energy, we fire off the Scald. We get yet another attack drop. Rick, you may need to play the lottery this week, as your luck has been pretty good with RNG. Poliwrath makes the power-up punch, goes unshielded. We send out the Muk. The opponent, with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, concede the match. Let's go. In the next battle, we see another pesky Spider. See the immediate pivot into Drapion. Drapion going to fire off the Crunch as soon as we get it, which does take a turn. So we actually outpace this Spider by a single turn. As always, Spiders love to shield. This time, Rick not willing to shield the Lunge. Lunge does quite a lot of neutral damage. The opponent then send out a Snarl Mandibuzz. Sludge Bomb, usually pretty good coverage in this matchup. However, debuffed, it does absolutely nothing to this flying Umbreon. Fuck me, this thing's bulky. The opponent actually throws a Foul Play, probably looking to get a bit more farm. With the Snarl down, we return fire. With the Sludge Bomb, Rick says, "You're not farming me down," and pivots back out into Poliwrath. This matchup's got a lot better since you got counter. The opponent had Aerial Ass the entire time. Ricflair going to return fire with the Power-Up Punch, ramping up our attack. If you ever wondered why I call Aerial Ace Aerial Ass, because Poliwrath is in Shadow form and we still tank 2 reasonably well. We now get the full counter farm down. The opponent sends out Jellicent. This isn't a great matchup for Poliwrath. However, Ricflair gonna fire off the Scald, and of course he gets the attack full. Poliwrath still not done, makes 1 more Scald. This is actually get Jellicent reasonably low, down to around 40% HP, and we double debuff him. We send out Muk. Back out comes Galvantula. We look to catch a move. The opponent doesn't throw. Rick gonna be forced to start shielding. We shield up the Lunge. We are going to outpace to the Dark Pulse. However, the opponent still has 1 Protect Shield, 2 high behind, and they invest it here. Galvantula makes a charge move. I think Rick has to shield this up, commit to the full Poison Jab farm down. I don't know if we make it, but we're going to have to try. Rick opts to throw the Dark Pulse. However, I think this Jellicent is just going to double surf us and take the dub. Back out comes Jellicent. 1 surf won't be lethal. However, they got a huge amount of farm. Off the Poliwrath, they make the second surf and are going to take that game. So a potential win con there would have been to look to try and poison jab all the way down and get the Dark Pulse ready for the Jellicent. In the next battle, we see Poliwrath into Scrafty, the opponent safe switches into Jellicent, we show him the Drapion and the opponent just concedes. In the next battle, we see Poliwrath into Nidoqueen. Nidoqueen can beat the entirety of our team. Let's see how Rick plays this out. We tank the Poison Fang, return fire with the Scald. Scald draws a shield, we then Simul swap again. The opponent safe switches into Jelly. Like I've said throughout the video, Jellicent is one of the best safe switch in the Ultra League, and my god, is Drapion some response. As you can see, we can easily tank 2 Surfs, whereas this big Jellyfish definitely cannot tank 2 Crunches. Rick gonna tank the second Surf. I imagine he throws 4 Poison Stings and the Crunch, which he does. Again, gameplay on point. Drapion looks like it's on low HP, however, if Nidoqueen looks to Poison Jab farm us all the way down, Drapion will make 2 Crunches. The first Crunch goes unshielded. We get the defense drop. Drapion actually doesn't make the second Crunch, which is absolutely brutal. We still have 2 Protect Shields, 2 hard behind. The opponent full sends the Earth Power. And then pivot out into Tapu Fini, and the double Dark Poison Trap claims another victim. In the next battle, this time we see the Jellyfish in the lead. As Drapion is a hard response, this time Rick safe switches into Alolan Muk. Interestingly enough, the opponent is staying in. I smell a fairy. Rick fires off the Dark Pulse. The opponent commits a shield. Rick can survive this Surf, however he evidently knows that Muk is going to be pretty good at whatever's hiding behind this Jellyfish. Rick fires off 4 Poison Jabs and the next Dark Pulse. The opponent opts to double shield. They've definitely got a fairy. Probably an Alolan Ninetales and maybe a Scrafty if that's a guess. Rick takes his shield advantage then, sends out Drapion. Drapion easily going to survive this Surf. Jellicent fires off the Surf. The opponent then makes a great catch, catching the Crunch onto the Alolan Ninetales that I could smell from a mile away. The opponent gonna fire off the Weather Ball. Rick probably gonna shield this up, which he does. We can then overfarm slightly, fire off the Sludge Bomb just before the opponent reaches the next Weather Ball. Sludge Bomb vanquishes Ninetales back to their Pokeball. The opponent then sends out Jellicent, so perhaps it isn't Scrafty. What the heck is in the back? Rick fires off the Crunch. Crunch doesn't quite KO. Drapion getting pretty close to Surf range. Surf doesn't take us out. We send back out Muk. The opponent's got Gramble. Uh-oh. Poliwrath in the 0 shield's going to be getting torn apart by the charm damage. However, Poliwrath makes the Scald. Shadow Gramble forgot its defense. That Scald secures the knockout. It's going to be counter versus Hex. Who will win? Poliwrath double resisted, counter farms down and takes that game. We then see Poliwrath into the Bear Trap. The opponent safe switches into Venusaur, and here comes Alolan Muk. Alolan Muk does resist all charge moves. However, Frenzy Plant is a busted move. Muk looks like the second one will get a super low, so Rick over farms, fires off the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse doesn't quite KO. We will survive this Frenzy Plant, but we're going to be so low. Frenzy Plant almost takes us out. The opponent sends back out the Bear Trap. They get the farm down. Rick maintains alignment, so we send back out Poliwrath to punch through this Bear Trap. We shield up the Earthquake. The opponent's final Pokemon is Cresselia, and here comes Drapion. Drapion far spammier than Cresselia. We fire off the first Crunch. The opponent correctly lets the first one go, as the second one, if we get a debuff, would do more damage. However, looking at the health, with all the Poison Stings, 2 will be lethal. The opponent gonna be forced to shield this up. We farm up, fire on the CMP tie. The opponent actually lets it go. I'm so used to the damage output of my own Drapion, I actually use a Hundo. And 2 Crunches always knock out Cresselia and Giratina. It looks like Rick using a low attack one. The opponent fires off the Grass Knot. We then Simul swap Poliwrath back into the Bear Trap. The opponent still with 2 Protect Shields, 2 high behind, and we're running Power Up Punch, which is going to vamp up our attack. Rick this time goes for the Scald. The opponent lets it go. They're saving 1 shield for next season. We counter down Cresselia and take that game. Speaking of Cresselia, this time we see it in the lead. The opponent stays in, allowing Rick to fire off a Crunch. Crunch goes unshielded. The opponent's still staying in. Pretty questionable. Moonblast does hit for neutral. However, this isn't a great matchup for the opponent as Drapion far out spams them. The opponent now sends out Lapras, and Drapion gonna do what Drapion does best and spam out Crunches. The first Crunch lands. Rick this time opting for the Sludge Bomb, which does do more damage. The opponent also lets that go. The opponent not going to be able to Ice Shard farm us all the way down. They have to throw a Surf. Surf secures the knockout, where this is just free farm for Poliwrath. Poliwrath comes in, gets the full counter farm down. Switch timers are misaligned, so we can pivot back out into Alolan Muk, and the opponent is switch locked. Rick farms up, fires off the Dark Pulse, putting huge shield pressure on the opponent. The opponent does give up their first Protect Shield, then send out the Kentucky Fried Chicken. Bird of Death Rick again fires off the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse goes unshielded, and that's going to be game over. Rick can now shield this move up, commit to the full Poison Jab farm down. No one move is going to take out Muk from this health range. We are going to shield up the Moonblast. Rick going to be able to fire off the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse will be forcing the final shield off Cresselia. Do we see the combo play? No, we don't. The opponent going to fire off one more Moonblast. However, Muk shrugs it off. We now pivot out into Poliwrath, and Poliwrath is a Cresselia counter confirmed. GG's, and thanks for playing. In the next battle, we see Poliwrath into Scrafty. Great lead. The opponent is staying in and counter tearing through the opponent. We both throw the power up punch. However, Poliwrath with the higher attack stat wins the CMP tie. This is not a great spot for the opponent. Power up punch doesn't do too much to us. They now pivot out into, of course, Jellicent, and Jellicent once again hard checked by Drapion. Ric Flair strikes first, landing the crunch. The opponent in absolute shambles. If I'm being brutally honest, they fire off the Surf. Drapion shrugs it off. We then fire off the next crunch. Crunch will be lethal or forcing a shield. Looks like the opponent looking to make a play for switch. Rick still with 2 shields, knowing he doesn't have to shield this Surf. Drapion going to actually get outpaced this time to the next Surf. We do invest the shield here. It looks like the opponent desperately trying to realign. However, Rick's Drapion makes another crunch. The opponent actually investing both Protect Shields. Drapion pretty low. We're not going to get Hex farm down. Rick could shield this up, or he could let it go. It looks like he's saving shield advantage for Muk. Once again, we send in Muk. Are we going to go for the aggressive Poison Jab farm down? Rick going to tank the Surf. If Jellicent doesn't pivot, they are going to get farmed down. Rick gets a beautiful Poison Jab farm down. Back out comes Scrafty. And if the opponent don't know about the Sludge Wave coverage, my god, are they about to find out. Sludge Wave vanquishes them back to their Pokeball. The opponent's final Pokemon is Giratina. Muk with a Protect Shield to hide behind. Shields up the Dragon Claw. We then return fire with the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse lands for huge damage. Muk still not in Dragon Claw range. Muk looking to sweep the opponent's entire team. Dragon Claw doesn't knock out Muk, makes the Dark Pulse and completes a very nice sweep. GG's, and thanks for playing. We see the absolute dream lead in the next battle. Poliwrath into Alolan Sandslash. The opponent pivots into Pidgeot, and here comes Alolan Muk. Alolan Muk tearing apart this pesky Pidgeon with the Poison Jabs. The opponent goes for the Feather Dance. Muk shrugs it off, and we're again throwing that Hail Mary. Does the opponent respect the Sludge Wave? They do not. Even debuffed, it lands for huge neutral damage. Rick gonna shield off a potential Brave Bird. The opponent does full send, and everything going right for Rick in this battle. Back out comes Sandslash, and again this isn't a particularly bad matchup for Muk, as the Shadow Claws are resisted. We land the Dark Pulse, even double debuff from the Feather Dance. It still does quite a lot of neutral damage. The opponent now fires off the Drill Run. Back out comes Poliwrath. The opponent's final Pokemon is a Fairy Winkler Fable. Again, we're sending that Hail Mary. Does the opponent respect the damage? They do not. Get absolutely wrecked. Rick proving why you shouldn't masturbate, as throwing the Hail Mary and the opponent looking to call a bait has cost them dearly. The opponent will take out our Drapion. However, Poliwrath just going to punch through the remainder of the team. The opponent really needs to top left, as the only win con at this stage would be Rick dying of a heart attack. And evidently he's alive and well, because he sent me these battles. The opponent continuing to play it out. They go for the Ice Punch bait. However, no bait is going to save their fate. GG's. Poliwrath into Squidward. Shout out SpongeBob SquarePants. We see the pivot into Drapion, and Drapion gonna spam out a crunch. However, Tentacruel, super bulky crunch, doesn't do that much. The opponent looking to chip and dip with the Scald. Rick knows he easily survives this. The opponent then sends out Scrafty. Scrafty won't appreciate this Sludge Bomb. If the opponent looks to counter farm us all the way down, we might even make one more. The opponent recognises that, throws the Power Up Punch. Power Up Punch will secure the knockout. It looks like the opponent no bubbled that, giving themselves one extra counter's worth of farm. However, this energy isn't going to go very far into Poliwrath. Power Up Punch does absolutely nothing. Poliwrath gets the full counter farm down. Switch timer back up. Rick pivots back out into Muk. Muk once again needs to put in a whole heap of work. Tough decision to make. We shield up a potential Scald, and the opponent Acid Spray baits us. That is not fantastic. Then pivot out into Umbreon. Rick goes straight for the Sludge Wave. Sludge Wave lands for huge neutral damage. Muk out here making Umbreon not look that bulky, but let me tell you, that thing is fucking thick. Rick did shield at the last resort, and again he's not baiting. Come on, trainer, call the bait. No, the opponent shields. This last resort is going to do quite a lot, despite not being a great move, as we've got a lower defense. Switch timer pops up. We look to snipe with Poliwrath. Rick now throws the power-up punch, looking to ramp up our attack. Power-up punch doesn't knock out. The opponent saves Umbreon on 1 HP, and the Dream. Back out comes Tentacruel. We fire off the Scald. We get the attack drop. However, the opponent did shield. We then fire off the power-up punch on the CMP type. Power-up punch isn't going to do a lot, but at this stage, we need all the chip damage we can get. Scald is going to take us out. Come on, Muk, you need to poison jab down. Do we make it? No. The opponent makes a charge move, and the opponent going to win a super close game. Oh, it's just an acid spray. We survive. We make the Dark Pulse, and fuck me, I can't believe Rick won that game. Woo! Roller coaster of emotions. Come on, Jamie, pull yourself together. Poliwrath into Cresselia. We see the instant pivot into Drapion. The opponent answers with Toxicroak. Toxicroak, an absolute wall to all of Drapion's energy. However, Toxicroak, not that bulky. Sludge Bomb does quite a lot of damage. The opponent getting greedy, so we make a Crunch. Crunch gets this Toxicroak deep into the red. Although the opponent is low, Rick isn't going to be able to Poison Sting, farm them down, so we just let his Drapion go down. Rick going to send out Poliwrath to look for the resisted counter farm down. However, Toxicroak is going to make a Sludge Bomb. Sludge Bomb going to do quite a lot, so Rick opts to shield it. We then get the full counter farm down. I'm not sure on that shield, as Muk down a shield, probably going to struggle against Cresselia. We see the pivot into Muk. The opponent's final Pokemon is Skunktank, and this game looks really tough. We go straight for the Sludge Wave, looking to do as much damage as possible. Sludge Wave does a lot of resisted damage. How does Rick win this game? We correctly shield up a Flamethrower, but now Cresselia has a 2-0 shield advantage. Rick goes straight for the Dark Pulse, so I imagine the opponent just lets this go, saving their shields for Cresselia. The opponent actually shields. Muk should survive any one move. The opponent again throws the Flamethrower. We then see the pivot into Poliwrath. We get the snipe. Out comes Cresselia. Poliwrath fires off the Scald. Scald is going to hit for neutral. However, Cresselia, super bulky. They're already at a charge move. Moonblast will take us out. The opponent actually goes for a Grass Knot, opting to go for the Psycho Cut farm down. Poliwrath makes another Scald. However, the opponent doesn't need to shield this up. They tank it on the chin. They get the full Psycho Cut farm down. They leave with a move, and that is going to be all she wrote. GG's to that opponent. Huge shout out to Ricflairbest for the incredible battle submission, showing that my classic Poliwrath Double Dark Poison team is back and better than ever. He went on a great run. A few other people have messaged me saying this team's really working, so if you have access to these Pokemon, give it a try for yourself. If you're enjoying the content, smash that like button. If you're new, consider subscribing. If you'd like your battles featured on the channel, a link to my battle submission form is down below. And as always, a huge thank you to everyone for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.